West Asia had feared this day for decades. A war between Iran and Israel. No more fighting in the shadows, no more proxy conflicts, a direct war.
The Israel-Palestine conflict is one of the most enduring and contentious struggles of our age. On today's world stage, few names resonate as strongly as Benjamin Netanyahu, Israel's longest-serving prime minister, a master of political survival and controversy alike. His policies and rhetoric have shaped a generation of Israelis and Palestinians, and his decisions echo far beyond the borders of the Middle East. In this 15-minute documentary, we will explore 5 key dimensions: Netanyahu's rise to power, the criminal allegations he faces at home and abroad, the devastating humanitarian crisis in Gaza, Hamas's role and responsibilities, and the broader Israel-Iran confrontation that threatens to widen the conflict. Along the way, we will ground every assertion in the latest available data, statistics reports, and eyewitness accounts up through June 14, 2025.
New airstrikes on Gaza, while Hamas militants launched more than 100 rockets towards Tel Aviv.
Our aim is to present a factual, balanced portrait, to inform, not to inflame, to document, not to demonize. By the end, you will have a clearer understanding of who Netanyahu is, what drives this conflict, and why the search for truth remains as vital as ever. Netanyahu's rise to power. Benjamin Netanyahu was born in Tel Aviv in 1949, just 1 year after the founding of the State of Israel. His father, a historian, instilled in him a deep sense of Jewish identity and Zionist conviction. After graduating from high school, Netanyahu served in the Israel Defense Forces elite Sayeret Matkal unit, participating in covert operations that would later cement his reputation as a security hard-liner. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, he studied at MIT and served as Israel's deputy ambassador to the United Nations under Prime Minister Yitzhak Shamir. Yet it was his return to domestic politics in the mid-1990s that marked the beginning of his ascent. In 1996, at age 46, Netanyahu became Israel's youngest prime minister, campaigning on a platform of strong security and opposition to the Oslo peace process. Though he served only until 1999, his brief premiership heralded a new era, one in which the politics of fear and security would dominate national discourse. Following a decade in opposition, Netanyahu reclaimed the premiership in 2009. Over the next 16 years, he became a master at forming coalitions, often allying with right-wing and ultra-Orthodox parties to secure a parliamentary majority. He capitalized on regional threats: Hamas rocket fire from Gaza, Hezbollah's buildup in Lebanon, and Iran's nuclear ambitions, to cast himself as the indispensable guardian of Israeli safety. Despite periodic scandals and growing internal dissent, Netanyahu maintained public support by emphasizing nationalism, economic growth, and a zero-tolerance approach to terror. His knack for durable alliances, even amid shifting public sentiment, has made him Israel's longest-serving leader in modern history. Yet his tenure has also deepened domestic divides over judicial reform, minority rights, and the future of the occupied territories. Today, as he embarks on what may be his final term, Netanyahu stands as both a symbol of Israeli resilience and a polarizing figure whose legacy will be judged by the lives lost and the peace that remains elusive. Netanyahu's political acumen has long been matched by his notoriety in the courts. Domestically, he faces 3 major corruption indictments: Case 1000 alleges that he accepted luxury gifts from wealthy benefactors, Case 2000 centers on an alleged deal with a newspaper publisher for favorable coverage, and Case 4000 accuses him of granting regulatory benefits to a telecom mogul in exchange for positive press. These trials, which began in 2020, have paralyzed the Israeli parliament at times, fueling fierce debates over the rule of law and political immunity. Netanyahu insists the charges are a witch hunt orchestrated by political rivals and a biased judiciary. His supporters, many of them staunch nationalists, have rallied behind him, framing the trials as an existential battle over Israel's character. On the international front, the stakes have risen dramatically. In May 2024, the International Criminal Court in The Hague formally opened an investigation into alleged war crimes committed during Israel's military operations in Gaza. While the ICC's jurisdiction does not automatically extend to Israeli citizens, Palestine's accession to the Rome Statute in 2015 granted it a pathway to bring cases. In April 2025, ICC prosecutor Karim Khan announced that he would seek arrest warrants for senior Israeli officials, including Netanyahu, citing evidence of disproportionate attacks on civilians and blockade policies that may amount to collective punishment. Reactions were swift and polarized. Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International hailed the ICC's decision as a milestone for accountability. The UN Human Rights Council issued calls for restraint and justice. Conversely, Israel's government condemned the move as politically motivated, and its closest ally, the United States, threatened to cut funding to the court. Some European nations urged dialogue, warning that legal action alone could further destabilize the region. Netanyahu has vowed to fight the charges at every level, both in The Hague and on the world stage. His legal team argues that Israel's military operations were conducted in self-defense, with rigorous protocols to minimize civilian harm, an argument critics say rings hollow in light of mounting civilian casualties. This legal saga exposes a core dilemma: how to reconcile a nation's imperative to defend itself against terrorism with the demands of international humanitarian law. As Netanyahu's trials both at home and abroad progress, the question remains whether political survival or moral accountability will shape the final verdict on his legacy. Gaza humanitarian crisis at the Gaza Strip, a slender 41-kilometer stretch of land along the Mediterranean, has become a focal point of human suffering. Home to roughly 2.2 million Palestinians, it is the most densely populated territory in the world. Since Hamas seized control in 2007, Israel has imposed a land, sea, and air blockade, citing security concerns. Over the years, this blockade, combined with periodic military operations, has choked Gaza's economy and infrastructure. In October 2023, Hamas's surprise attack on southern Israel triggered one of the deadliest cycles of violence in the region's modern history. In the ensuing months, Israel launched Operation Iron Shield aimed at dismantling Hamas's military capabilities. By June 14, 2025, more than 55,000 Palestinians have been killed, including nearly 22,000 children, figures that include both combatants and civilians caught in crossfire. Over 7,000 Israelis have also lost their lives, many due to Hamas rocket barrages and terror attacks. More than 1.8 million Palestinians, over 80% of Gaza's population, have been displaced at least once, forced into makeshift camps, UN shelters, or overcrowded buildings repurposed as temporary refuges. The United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs reports that over 90% of Gaza's homes have suffered damage and nearly 65% are now uninhabitable. Fuel shortages have led to daily blackouts of up to 20 hours, crippling hospitals, water desalination plants, and sanitation systems. In early 2025, Médecins Sans Frontières, Doctors Without Borders, announced that Gaza's healthcare infrastructure has effectively collapsed. Only 6 of its 40 hospitals remain partially functional. Doctors report that critical supplies, anesthetics, antibiotics, and even basic bandages are in desperately short supply. Ambulances often run out of fuel, and power for life-saving equipment is unreliable. Malnutrition rates have surged. 20% of children under 5 are now acutely malnourished, compared with 2% before October 2023. Satellite imagery from June 2025 reveals entire neighborhoods reduced to rubble. Schools, once bulwarks of hope for Gaza's youth, lie in ruins. The United Nations Relief and Works Agency estimates that more than 60% of Gaza's children have lost access to formal education. The psychological toll is equally harrowing. PTSD, depression, and suicide rates among children and adults have doubled in the past year, according to local mental health professionals. Aid agencies face near-constant obstacles. Israeli security authorities routinely halt convoys at border crossings, citing smuggling concerns. Tunnels under the Gaza-Egypt border, once used to bring in food and medicine, are now heavily monitored and bombed. UN officials warn that Gaza could become uninhabitable within 2 years if current restrictions persist. Yet amid this devastation, stories of resilience emerge. Community centers run by NGOs offer makeshift schooling and trauma counseling. Local farmers, despite seed shortages, attempt to cultivate small rooftop gardens. Civil society groups in Gaza City have organized mobile clinics, dodging airstrikes to reach remote areas. These acts of defiance underscore the enduring human spirit in the face of unrelenting hardship. Still, the numbers paint a stark picture. Gaza's civilian population is trapped in a cycle of violence, deprivation, and displacement. International calls for ceasefires and humanitarian corridors have repeatedly faltered. Each failed ceasefire deal prolongs the agony, deepens mistrust, and diminishes hope. As the world watches, Gaza stands as a testament to the human cost of protracted conflict, a cost measured not only in statistics but in shattered lives and dreams deferred. Hamas and Palestinians respond while Gaza's civilians bear the greatest burden. The actions of Hamas, the Islamist militant group governing the Strip, cannot be ignored. On October 7, 2023, Hamas operatives infiltrated Israeli border communities, killing over 400 civilians and abducting more than 250 hostages. The brutality of these attacks shocked the world and intensified the cycle of retaliation. Hamas's charter explicitly calls for Israel's destruction, and its leadership has long used civilian populations as shields, building rocket launchers under schools, hospitals, and mosques. Independent investigations by human rights organizations have documented instances in which Palestinian neighborhoods were used to conceal arms depots, endangering non-combatants. Moreover, Hamas's governance of Gaza has been characterized by severe restrictions on political freedoms, press censorship, and summary executions of suspected collaborators. In the past year alone, local human rights monitors recorded over 60 cases of extrajudicial killings. Economic mismanagement and corruption have compounded civilian suffering, as funds diverted to tunnel construction and militia pay have left hospitals and schools chronically underfunded. Yet, to paint Hamas solely as a villain neglects the broader context of occupation and blockade. Many Gazans support Hamas out of frustration with the status quo and the absence of viable alternatives. Nevertheless, under international law, non-state actors remain accountable for crimes against civilians. The dual accountability: Israeli forces for disproportionate attacks, Hamas for terror tactics and governance abuses, underscores the complexity of pursuing justice in a land where the state and militants alike wield lethal force. Israel vs Iran war Jipo Patnal war. Beyond the Gaza frontline lies the shadow conflict between Israel and Iran, a struggle that has long played out in secretive operations, proxy battles, and cyber warfare. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps (IRGC) funds and arms Hezbollah in Lebanon and Hamas in Gaza, seeking to extend Tehran's influence to Israel's doorstep. Israel, in turn, has launched airstrikes, often covered, against Iranian facilities in Syria and Iraq, aiming to halt arms transfers. On June 13, 2025, Israel unveiled Operation Rising Lion, a series of coordinated strikes on over 120 sites in Iran and allied territories. Targets included the Natanz and Fordo nuclear facilities, IRGC command centers, and weapons depots. Senior IRGC commanders, among them Major General Hossein Salami and Brigadier General Amir Ali Hajizadeh, were reportedly killed in the attacks. Iran responded within hours, launching a barrage of some 150 ballistic missiles and over 200 armed drones toward Israel's northern frontier. Multiple air raid sirens blared across Tel Aviv, Haifa, and Jerusalem. Anti-missile batteries intercepted most projectiles, but 12 civilians were wounded and 2 killed by falling debris. The United States scrambled Aegis destroyers to bolster Israel's missile defenses, while Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates urged both sides to de-escalate. Oil prices spiked by 8% in global markets, reflecting fears of a broader regional conflagration. Hezbollah launched occasional rockets from southern Lebanon, further complicating Israel's security calculus. This Israel-Iran confrontation amplifies the Gaza crisis by reinforcing hard-line narratives on both sides. Netanyahu has pointed to Iran's existential threat to justify sweeping military operations in Gaza and beyond, while Tehran frames its support for Palestinian groups as resistance against an occupation. The risk of miscalculation is ever present. A single malfunctioning missile or unauthorized strike could ignite a full-scale war, drawing in powers from Washington to Ankara. In this titanic struggle, civilians once again stand on the front lines of geopolitics. The Gaza conflict and the Israel-Iran rivalry are inextricably linked, each feeding the other in a relentless cycle of provocation and reprisal. The decades-long conflict between Israel and Palestine, now intertwined with the wider Israel-Iran standoff, has produced staggering human costs. Over 63,000 deaths since October 2023, millions displaced, and entire societies traumatized. Benjamin Netanyahu, for better or worse, has been the central architect of Israel's strategy, a leader praised for his resolve and vilified for his unyielding tactics. His domestic trials and ICC investigations underscore the growing demand for accountability, even at the highest levels of power. On one side, Gaza's civilians endure a man made humanitarian collapse, their futures mortgaged to the whims of armed factions and blockade policies. On the other, Israeli families live under the shadow of rocket fire and terror attacks, their sense of security perpetually threatened. Hamas's brutal October 7 offensive and Iran's proxy warfare exacerbate the suffering, fueling narratives of revenge that drown out calls for peace. Yet peace remains possible, but only if leaders confront uncomfortable truths and citizens demand empathy over enmity. Justice cannot mean impunity for any actor, whether a democratically elected prime minister
I was prime minister.
or an extremist militia. It must encompass reparations for victims, guarantees of human rights, and genuine negotiations toward two states living side by side in security and dignity. As we close, ask yourself, can new leadership emerge, on both sides, willing to break free from cycles of retaliation? Can the international community move beyond rhetoric to enforce accountability impartially? Only through such courage might we transform this land of ancient division into a beacon of reconciliation. This has been Netanyahu, Israel and Palestine Power, War, and Truth. Thank you for watching, and may understanding light the path to peace.